Bon dia, welcome to Exploring Timor-Leste, the podcast that talks about Southeast Asia's best kept travel secret. I'm your host Jonty, and I'll share first-hand insights, expert interviews and practical travel tips. Whether you're a traveller, a culture lover or just curious about places rarely covered in the mainstream, you're in the right place. Let's explore Timor-Leste. Today's episode I'm going to talk about one of my favourite activities in Timor-Leste, which is hiking. Timor-Leste is home to some incredible hiking with some of the most impressive scenery in Southeast Asia, including near 3,000 metre high mountains, beautiful waterfalls, stunning beaches and diverse landscapes. Exploring Timor-Leste on foot allows you to enjoy the sights as well as the rich local culture and spend time with warm and welcoming Timorese. Note that hiking in Timor-Leste is very much frontier hiking with limited facilities and signage. You need to be prepared for heat, humidity and hills. It's best to walk early in the morning, soon after sunrise, to avoid the worst of the heat and take plenty of water and sun protection. However, if you are well prepared, Timor-Leste rewards with stunning scenery, friendly locals and a real sense of exploring where few other tourists have been. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about 10 hikes throughout Timor-Leste. So 3 in Dili, 3 summits outside of Dili, and then 4 multi-day adventures. I will do separate episodes in the future about day walks in Dili and day walks and longer walks on Ataru Island, but this episode will give you a good overview for what you can do on foot exploring Timor-Leste. Before I get into the walks, I would highlight that I have written a book called Exploring Timor-Leste on Foot, which is available on Amazon as a Kindle ebook, and that has the 10 I'm talking about today and another 20 more. The book provides a lot more information than I can cover in the podcast, including maps and photos. So if you're particularly keen on hiking in Timor-Leste, check that out. I'll start with the Horta Loop, which is probably the best known day walk in Timor-Leste, and that is in Dili from the Cristo Rey area. It's a 10 kilometre walk, takes about 3 hours. It's technically easy, but there is limited shade, so make sure you carry an umbrella or go prepared for walking in the sun for several hours. Navigation is pretty straightforward. It's basically a road walk, although most of the road is a gravel road. So you walk up past Ramses Horta's house on the Hira coastal road and follow the road, and then that will take you down to the coast on the other side of the hills. And then you turn left and then you follow the coastline around. There's a couple of nice bays. You'll walk around by Back Beach and then you're getting to Cristo Rey, the statue of Jesus, and then Cristo Rey Beach, and then back to where you started in a loop. And what's particularly good about this walk is there are a number of good places to eat, like beachside or Casbah, and you can start and finish from those places. So you can have brunch before, after you do the walk. Note that it is best to do the walk with other people. There have been a few instances around the very far side, so just take care. It's generally a very safe walk, but it goes to some relatively remote parts in Dili. It has beautiful scenery. You'll get amazing views of the coast. You go to Back Beach, and if you bring your snorkel gear, that's a great place to go for a snorkel. The second walk is in the Tasi Tolu Hills. So Tasi Tolu are the lakes near the airport in Dili. This is a 2 to 2.5 hour walk, which is quite a bit harder than the Horta Loop because it involves more climbing up hills, but it offers some of the best views of Dili from several lookout points. Now, navigationally, this is a little bit trickier, but if you start from the Gruta de Nossa, Senhora, Mariana Auxilliadora, or the Cave of Our Lady of Mount Golgotha, which you can find on Google Maps, that is the best place to start. So from there is a shrine. Notice it's a silent shrine, so be quiet and respectful if you're walking through there. And behind that shrine, there are 14 stations of the cross, which lead up the hillside to 3 crosses representing where Jesus was crucified. If you follow the crosses, that's quite straightforward and offers amazing views, and then you can return the way you came, or you can continue around the ridgeline and come down a different way. Now there are maps for all these hikes on exploringtimor.com. If you visit the hiking section of the website, there is a Google map which has lots of information about all these hikes, and it has links to GPS maps which you can use on all trails to avoid getting lost. The third walk is also in Dili, and this is another easy walk. It's about 13 kilometers, takes about 3 hours, and navigationally is quite straightforward, and it's the Tibar Coastal Walk. Start from Dili Rock, which marks the border between Dili and Likisar. You basically walk along the coast from Dili Rock. There's a bit of road walking, then you get onto the old coastal road to Likisar, which is a gravel road, beautiful coastal scenery. I'd really recommend walking it at low tide. If you walk it at low tide on a still morning, you have stunning reflections and you get great views of Tibar Port. At the end of the hike, you'll finish off at the mangroves in Tibar, which are well worth a visit. There's a lot more boardwalk than I was expecting, and there's some really interesting wildlife. That's a really good kind of way to either mark the halfway point of the walk. You can either walk back the way you came, or catch public transport back from the mangroves to where you started. Hike number 4 is probably the best known big hike in Timor-Leste, which is Mount Ramelau. So this is the highest point in Timor-Leste, nearly 3,000 meters high. It's a 3 to 5 hour return walk. It's about 10 kilometers and it's moderate to hard. Navigation is relatively straightforward, but you've got a reasonable amount of ascent to get to the summit. This starts from the village of Hato, which is in Naro. So if you go to Mabisi and a bit further on from there, the road from Mabisi to Hato is a dirt/mud road, depending on whether it's rained or not. You'll probably need a 4-wheel drive vehicle in order to get to Hato. That is the highest settlement in Timor-Leste, and it's a beautiful village just to explore. Many people go up Mount Ramelau for sunrise, which is around 6 a.m. So you need to start around 3 a.m. So an early start, but then you're rewarded with some stunning views at sunrise. And it was also very windy up there, and it's cold. It's the coldest place in Timor-Leste, which makes sense as the highest point. So make sure you take some layers while you're waiting for the sun to rise. A slightly warmer and more sleep-friendly approach is to go for sunset, but please make sure you take a head torch when you come down in the dark. The second highest peak in Timor-Leste is Matebian, which is in the Balcao municipality. It's a little bit tricky to get to the start. You need to take a rather rough, although it is being redeveloped, road up to Bagia, which is a beautiful place to visit anyway. It has an old Portuguese fort which you can stay in, and then you will need a guide for this because it is very easy to get lost, and it is quite a climb up to Matebian. It is not overly technical, but it is steep and a decent workout. So expect to take somewhere between 5 and 9 hours return to do the 9k walk to the summit. But the views, as you can imagine, are pretty impressive. Interestingly, the summit of Mount Ramelau is marked with a statue of the Virgin Mary, which was brought over from Italy in the late 90s. And the summit of Matebian is marked with a statue of Jesus, looking a bit like Cristo Rey, but quite a lot smaller. Another great hike is around the Mundo Perdido region, which is in Vaqueque. So it's one of the more remote areas. Vaqueque's got beautiful landscapes, and Mundo Perdido is very worthwhile for those interested in hiking. Again, a local guide is required because the tracks are pretty rough and often overgrown. It's also a good place for wildlife spotting, as it is Timor-Leste's largest remaining area of rainforest. To move on to the multi-day hikes, these you will need to do with a tour operator. There is very limited facilities and infrastructure for long distance hiking in Timor-Leste. Even getting food and water can be quite challenging, so you will need a support crew who can help you with the directions because there are no obvious trails, and also with food and supplies. The first of the multi-day hikes to talk about is La Rende. This is a 6-day adventure primarily through Amira, which is a particularly beautiful and mountainous part of Timor-Leste to the southwest of Dili. Now, this follows in the footstep of Australian soldiers and the Timorese who fought alongside them against the Japanese in 1942. This can be organised through Mad Dog Adventures, and it's a mixture of scenic hiking plus historic sites. We will get a good understanding of the conflict that took place between February and August 1942. It's 92 kilometers long and expect to climb around 4,500 meters and go down 3,500 meters. The final 3 hikes I'll talk about today are all multi-day adventures with Eco Discovery. Eco Discovery is pretty much, apart from Mad Dog who do La Rende, Eco Discovery are the go-to tour operator for doing any hiking in Timor-Leste. They've got the experience and they're just very nice people, and I had a great time exploring these routes with them. The first to talk about is Mount Saboria to Mindelo. Start close to the summit of Mount Saboria, which offers great views of Mount Ramelau. From there, you follow the ridge lines with fantastic views into the Mubisi area before climbing to the shrine at the summit of Mount Ramelau, which is different to Mount Ramelau. So Ramelau, there is a bit of a festival that happens there every year, and they're trying to turn it into a bit more of a tourist destination, and there is a rare campsite. You'll see a lot of coffee being grown on this hike, as it's one of the main coffee growing areas of Timor-Leste, as well as walking through welcoming and interesting small villages along the way. The last day is very remote, and the main reason for visiting, other than some very impressive scenery, is to go to the site where Timorese hero Nicholas Lobato was killed by Indonesian forces in 1978, and you get a real feeling for they were hiding from the Indonesians, and this is quite a remote place to hide. You can understand why it took them a while to find them. This is a 46-kilometer 3-day hike along some quite rugged terrain, so you do need to be fit and well prepared. The 9th hike is Tapo to Asabi. It's a phenomenal 4-day hike through Bobanaro and Amira. It includes 2 natural hot springs and the highest waterfall in the country. You start off hiking through beautiful lichen-filled forest up to a summit before a long descent down to Marobo's natural hot springs. They're not very well maintained, but they are an incredible spot to visit. Camping there for the night and then heading over into Amira through to Asabi, which is probably one of my favourite villages in Timor-Leste. It has amazing mountain views and it's just a beautiful place to camp out. So that is a 4-day trip with about 2.5 days worth of hiking, because it's a 6-hour drive to the start and a 6-hour drive back to Dili at the end. And you're going to cover about 42 kilometers and go up and down about 2,000 meters. So it's a reasonably challenging hike, but you're rewarded with an incredible hiking experience. The final of the 10 is the longest and probably therefore the hardest of these hikes. This is an 8-day epic crossing the entirety of Timor-Leste from the north coast to the south coast. Again, this is with Eco Discovery, and you're going to hike around 100 kilometers with over 5,000 meters of elevation. This includes summiting Mount Ramelau, and you'll also have a good look at Mount Kablaki, which is the 4th highest mountain in Timor-Leste and probably the scariest from my experience, just given the terrain, and it's very overgrown and quite a challenging mountain to hike around, but it was an incredible experience. When I did this hike in 2024, it hadn't been hiked for about 6 years, and probably less than 50 people have actually done this hike. So it is pretty remote. A number of people have run it or attempted to run it, which is beyond what I could do. But hiking it over 8 days was just an amazing adventure, very varied. You get a real feel for Timor-Leste as a country. Hopefully those 10 hikes have given you an idea of the variety of hiking that you can do in Timor-Leste. It's worth finishing off with us a few general points around hiking in Timor-Leste. So first of all, it is a hot place. This is a tropical country, relatively close to the equator, so expect it to be hot, 30 degrees plus, and also humid. So you do need to be prepared with sun protection in terms of hats and plenty of water, and things like electrolytes or hydrolytes are really useful for refreshing yourself. An umbrella can be fantastic if you have limited shade. You need to be careful to avoid heat stroke. That is always a risk when you are hiking in Timor-Leste. Again, starting early in the morning will help, and taking rest through the day and drinking and pacing yourself. The terrain in Timor-Leste is quite rugged. Underfoot is generally not too bad. It's often rocky or potentially a little bit muddy. You don't need to worry about tree roots that much, particularly compared to my native New Zealand. But there are no real official hiking trails. You're using the paths that locals use to get between villages. So the condition of those paths can vary quite significantly, and you will need a local guide. Otherwise, you're going to get very lost very easily. Apparently nearly half the land in Timor-Leste is at a slope of 40 degrees or more, so expect to generally be going up a hill or down a hill. River crossings are rarely bridged, so you would need to either rock hop, or a safer option is to walk across in your boots, as they will dry quickly in the hot climate. In terms of wildlife, despite Timor-Leste being relatively close to Australia, which is full of things that will kill you, there's almost nothing in Timor-Leste that's going to hurt you. Although Timor-Leste does have a few poisonous animals and plants, you're very unlikely to come across them during your hiking. I've did a lot of hiking in Timor-Leste. I saw one snake, which was quite impressive, but it disappeared before I could get my camera out. I found one place had stinging nettles, but otherwise the plants are going to leave you alone. On Aotearoa Island, march flies can be a problem in some places at some times of the year. They're not poisonous, but they do have quite a nasty bite and don't seem to mind even copious amounts of DEET. So the only way to really cope with those is to wear long pants or wear zip-offs that you can add them when required. In the wet season, there may be leeches in some places near rivers. I came across, I think, 2 or 3 leeches in my entire time in Timor-Leste, so they're not that common, but if you're unlucky, you may come across them. The most common animal you're going to come across are dogs, because pretty much every single household in Timor-Leste has at least one dog, and they're there to protect the household. So they're not going to necessarily chase after you. They will bark much more than they will bite, but you just do need to be aware that they will come and investigate if you're walking close to them. This is why I find that having local guides is very helpful to deal with the dog situation. I never got bitten by a dog, but I certainly got barked at by a lot of dogs, and if you're not comfortable with that, that can be quite confronting. If you start talking to the owners of the house, that tends to calm the dogs down. Hiking poles are very useful just to give yourself some protection and just move away from the home when you can, and then they will leave you alone. So I've mentioned a few times that guides are essential for quite a few of these hikes, less so maybe in Dili, but certainly when you get outside of Dili, they are invaluable. In terms of finding a guide, Eco Discovery, they can really help you out either with organising hikes with them, or they will have local contacts. Also in local guest houses, for example, Bigia Fort near Matebian, they can help organise guides. Those are a couple of ways you can find locals who can help you out. There is no certification of guides in Timor-Leste. Anybody can call themselves a guide, so you may just get the local farmer's son helping you out, but they will know the local terrain and be probably wearing jandals and go up the hill much faster than you will. There are no hiking shops in Timor-Leste, so you need to bring everything with you that you want to use. So decent shoes, plenty of water. Camelback is very helpful. So sun lotion, sun hat, sunglasses. I think hiking poles are essential, both for dealing with the terrain, with the ups and downs, and also dealing with any dogs. I swear by umbrellas for hiking, which is a bit of a minority view, but they're super helpful for sun protection and obviously rain protection. Bring some decent insect repellent. Electrolytes and hydrolytes are very helpful after a day's hiking to help you rehydrate. A small cloth or a sweat rag can be really useful as well, because your hiking shirt is going to be wet through with sweat pretty soon after starting hiking. Bring along any food or snacks that you want, because options are limited to non-existent whilst you're out hiking, and expect limited mobile phone reception depending on where you are. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a taster for hiking in Timor-Leste. Check out exploringtimorleste.com, the hiking section, for more information, and Exploring Timor-Leste on foot for a comprehensive guide to hiking in this beautiful country. Thank you so much for listening to Exploring Timor-Leste. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps more people discover the show. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email at exploringtimorleste@gmail.com. Until next time, obrigado ho adeus.